Today we are looking at a case from the first part of the 20th century. So sit back as we go to the USA. Marion Parker was born on the 11th of October 1915 to Perry and Geraldine Parker in Los Angeles in California. Marion had a twin sister named Marjorie and an older brother named Perry Jr. Marion and Marjorie were twins, and although they did look similar, like sisters, they were not identical. Their father had a job at the National Trust and Savings Bank, where he had worked as a manager for 20 years. Geraldine was a stay-at-home mother. Marion was particularly close to her father and wanted to spend as much time with him as possible, including going with him to work at the bank when possible. Those who knew her described Marion as a nice child who was a bit of a tomboy. She had lots of friends, but preferred to spend time with her family, playing trains and throwing footballs. On the 15th of December 1927, Marion and her sister Marjorie went to school as usual. They attended Mount Vernon Junior High School and were in the 6th grade. They travelled to school in the streetcar. It would pick them up every morning and take them home again in the afternoon. And this day was no different. They got up, got dressed, ate breakfast, and went outside and waited for the streetcar. It picked them up and took them to school. Around noon, a man entered the school building. He approached the registrar, a lady named Mary Holt. He told her that his name was Mr. Cooper and explained that he worked at the bank with Mr. Perry Parker. He went on to say that Mr. Parker had been involved in a serious automobile accident and that he had been sent there to pick up his daughter. The registrar looked a bit bemused and asked him which daughter he was looking for. Mr. Cooper was unaware that there was in fact 2 Parker girls studying at the school, but he replied, "The younger one." "But they are twins," explained Mrs. Holt. Mr. Cooper looked somewhat embarrassed and replied, "Of course they are. I mean the smaller one." The young man may have sensed that the registrar did not believe his story, so he told her that she could phone the National Trust and Savings Bank, where the girl's father worked, and they would confirm everything. Mrs. Holt did not do this, as she thought that the man saying this suggested to her that Mr. Cooper was everything that he said he was. Marion was pulled from her class at 12:15 p.m, and she left the building with the man. No one at the school asked any questions or got any additional information. Instead, Marion was just handed over to Mr. Cooper. At the end of the day, Marjorie was waiting for her sister. They always got the streetcar back to their house together. However, on this day, Marion was not there. The streetcar arrived, and Marjorie was not sure what to do. Should she wait for Marion or get on board? She did not want to miss her ride home, so got into the streetcar. On the journey back to her house, she wondered what had delayed her sister. When Marjorie got home, Marion wasn't there, but the family just assumed that she had stayed behind at school, helping the teacher clean up, or something along those lines. However, by 4:45 p.m, Perry and Geraldine Parker had started to become worried. They called the school to check on Marion. The school registrar answered and explained that Marion had left with a man named Mr. Cooper that Mr. Parker had sent to pick her up earlier that day. Mr. Parker immediately called the police. They soon arrived at his house, and while there, Mr. and Mrs. Parker received a telegram. The telegram read, "Marion is secure. Use good judgment. Interference with my plans. Dangerous." The telegram was signed by Marion Parker and George Fox. The next day, the 16th of December, more correspondence arrived. This time a ransom note, titled Death, and demanding $1,500 in gold certificates for the safe return of Marion. This time, the note read, "PM Parker, use good judgment. You are the loser. Do this. Secure 75 $20 gold certificates in US currency. $1,500 at once. Keep them on your person. Go about your business as usual. Leave out police and detectives. Make no public notice. Keep this affair private. Make no search. Fulfilling these terms with the transfer of currency will secure the return of the girl. Failure to comply with these requests means no one will ever see the girl again, except the angels in heaven. The affair must end one way or the other within 3 days." He finished the letter by writing, "If you want aid against me, ask God, not man." This was followed by 2 very similar notes, all of which had been signed: Fate, Death, and the Fox. One letter included a postscript in Marion's handwriting. It read, "Daddy, please do what this man tells you, or he will kill me if you don't. Your loving daughter, Marion Parker." Perry received a call from the kidnapper, who gave him details of where to meet with the money. The location was 10th Street, Gramercy Place. Later, the kidnapper telephoned Mr. Parker, instructing him to leave for the location immediately, and told him not to worry, as he would recognise his car. Mr. Parker complied with the kidnapper's request. He met at the specified location, at the specified time, with the money he had asked for. Before leaving his house, however, he had recorded the serial numbers of each of the bills, in the knowledge that they could be identified when used in future exchanges. This would then help the authorities to track the kidnapper. Unfortunately, the police who were investigating the case had followed Mr. Parker without his knowledge, and when the kidnapper realised what was going on, he fled. The following day, the kidnapper sent more telegrams to the Parkers' home. The first outlined how foolish Mr. Parker had been to involve the police, as now news of his daughter's abduction had appeared in the press. The kidnapper indicated that this would be the last day before he would kill Marion. This was followed by a letter written in Marion's handwriting. In it, she begged her father to follow the kidnapper's demands and not involve the police. Mr. Parker was extremely anxious, and after speaking with officers, it was agreed that he could meet the kidnapper alone. 2 further telegrams arrived at the Parker house that afternoon. The first began, "PM Parker, please recover your senses. I want your money, rather than to kill your child. But so far, you have given me no other alternative." The telegram was signed, "Fox Fate." The second telegram read, "Fox is my name. Very sly, you know. Set no traps. I'll watch for them. Get this straight. Remember that life hangs by a thread. I have a Gillette ready, and am able to handle the situation." It was simply signed, Fate. At 7:35 p.m, Mr. Parker received instructions. The kidnapper had given him a second chance to deliver the ransom. He was told to bring it to West 5th Street and South Manhattan Place. Again, Mr. Parker complied, and this time didn't involve the police. He arrived at the location, ransom in hand, by 8 p.m. that night, desperate to get his daughter back. A Chrysler coupe pulled up next to Mr. Parker's car. The man driving had his face completely covered with a bandana and had a firearm, which he pointed at Mr. Parker. Mr. Parker was able to see his daughter slumped in the passenger seat. He tried to ask her if she was okay, but Marion did not respond. The kidnapper reassured him that she was just sleeping. All Mr. Parker wanted was a safe return of his daughter, and thought that the kidnapper had probably used chloroform to render her unconscious. Mr. Parker handed over the ransom, but the kidnapper then took off in his car. However, after he had driven a little way up the street, he pushed Marion out onto the curb. Mr. Parker ran to his daughter, still holding on to hope that she was sleeping. He reached her and cradled his little girl, but immediately noticed that Marion was pale and all her limbs were missing. The hope he had was soon replaced with grief as he realised that his little girl was dead. He phoned the authorities, and at 9 p.m. that night an autopsy was conducted on Marion's body. The coroner revealed that Marion had been dead for approximately 12 hours, meaning that she was likely to have been alive during the first failed meeting. Her arms and legs had been cut off, and she had been disemboweled. Her lower stomach was stuffed with a towel and a man's shirt. Her eyes had been held open with piano wires, in order to give the appearance that she was still alive. Early the following day, the 18th of December, whilst on his morning walk, a man found the severed legs and arms of a child, along with their organs, lying on the street wrapped in newspaper. It was later confirmed that these limbs and organs belonged to Marion. News of the terrible murder of 12-year-old Marion Parker soon spread not only across Los Angeles, but across the whole of America. A $50,000 reward was offered for information that would lead to the arrest of the person who had carried out this most horrible act. Soon after, the reward was raised to $100,000. With schools on alert and parents of young children worried to let them out of their sight. The police knew that they had to act quickly to resolve the case. 2 men were apprehended. One, named Earl Smith, was the son of a local dentist. The second man was named Lewis Wyatt. Both were interviewed by detectives, but released without charge after Mary Holt, the school registrar, and the only person who was able to identify Marion's abductor, told the authorities that neither man was a person who had come to the school on the 15th of December. Police initiated a nationwide manhunt for the killer, which consisted of over 20,000 police officers and volunteers. A laundry mark on a shirt that Marion had been wrapped in led police to a Los Angeles apartment building named the Bellevue Apartments. They searched each room. In one they discovered a young man. He had black hair and identified himself as Donald Evans. He was lying in bed when 4 officers arrived, who said they were permitted to examine the room. He did not object, and the officers did not find anything suspicious. As they left, Mr. Evans told them that he hoped that they would soon catch the fiend. On the 20th of December, investigators discovered an abandoned car that was later identified to have been the one used by the kidnapper. Fingerprints were retrieved from the door, and it was confirmed that they belonged to Mr. William Edward Hickman, a 19-year-old man who was a former co-worker of Mr. Parker. The investigators later discovered that a year before Marion's murder, William Hickman had been arrested as a result of a complaint that Mr. Parker had filed. William Hickman had been stealing and forging checks totaling $400 and was sentenced to probation for his crimes. The investigators also managed to obtain fingerprints from the letters sent to Mr. and Mrs. Parker. These fingerprints also matched those of William Hickman. Thinking that William Hickman was a man responsible for the kidnapping and the murder of Marion Parker, detectives went to his apartment to look for further evidence, but they had already been there. It was the Bellevue Arms apartment building, occupied by Mr. Donald Evans. Detectives realised that Mr. Donald Evans was in fact Mr. William Hickman. This time, they were more thorough in their search, and inside the apartment, they found bloody footprints, along with partly burnt handwritten drafts of the ransom letters and newspaper clips regarding the kidnapping. The janitor of the building reported that he had witnessed Mr. Donald Evans, or Mr. William Hickman, carrying several packages to his car on the night of the 16th of December, and that he had observed him wiping down his car seats the following day. The police looked into the background of Mr. William Edward Hickman. They discovered that he was born in 1908 in Sebastian, in Arkansas, to Eva and William H. Hickman. He grew up in Kansas City, but in 1925, his father abandoned the family. Those who knew him described William as a good student who was active in several clubs, including the debating team. During the initial stages of the investigation, authorities were unable to obtain any leads on William Hickman's location. Despite searching for him in Kansas and El Paso, where his father resided, they came up empty-handed. However, his picture had appeared in all the newspapers across the country, and a breakthrough came when a gas station attendant in Oregon reported that he may have spotted the wanted man driving a green Hudson sedan. Later in Seattle, one of the $20 gold certificates was used to buy cold weather clothing. As a result, the police in the states of Washington and Oregon were put on high alert. On the 22nd of December 1927, in the historic town of Echo in northeast Oregon, Chief Police Officer Tom Godane and Traffic Officer Buck Llewellyn were taking a cigarette break when they saw a green Hudson car that immediately caught their attention. They started to follow it, and after a chase, they eventually caught up with it and forced the driver to pull over. The driver was the wanted man, Mr. William Hickman. He did not resist arrest and simply shrugged his shoulders and said, "Well, I guess it's all over." When Mr. Perry Parker learned of the arrest, he told reporters, "I feel a sense of deep and sincere thankfulness that this man has been captured and that mothers no longer need to fear that he may carry off their children." William Hickman did not deny that he had taken part in the kidnapping of 12-year-old Marion Parker, but he implicated 2 other men, brothers, Oliver and Frank Kramer. A reporter from the East Oregonian was given a detailed account of the kidnapping and murder by Mr. Hickman in which he claimed to have collaborated with the Kramers in the kidnapping plot. He told the reporter that he had even accompanied Marion to the Rialto Theatre to watch Figures Don't Lie. He did admit to his involvement in sending the telegrams and making the phone calls, but insisted that it was the Kramers who were responsible for the murder of the girl. However, the Kramers were able to provide a solid alibi, as they were both in prison and had been for a number of months. Detective Herman Klein was sent by the LAPD to accompany William Hickman on a train from Oregon to California. During the journey, William Hickman asked, "What do the people of California want with me?" To which Herman replied, "Honestly, they want your life. Rightly or wrongly, that's what they want." During the journey, he wrote a 19-page confession admitting to the murder of Marion Parker. In his confession, he revealed that he had committed the crime because he wanted to go to college but needed money to pay for the tuition. According to the statement, he killed Marion only after she recognised him, as they had previously met when she had accompanied her father to work. William admitted to strangling her and dismembering her body to make it easier to hide. He later realised that Mr. Parker would not pay the ransom for a dead child, so in order to give the impression that she was still alive, he stuffed towels into her body and sewed her eyes open. On the 25th of January 1928, the trial of William Hickman commenced. He pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, which was a new defence in California at the time. In preparation for this plea, he had begun to act strangely while in prison, muttering to himself in his cell and pretending to be deaf when spoken to by others. Adding further complexity to the case, he had also confessed to killing a pharmacist named Charles Toms with an accomplice named Welby Hunt. Reporters from all over the country descended on Los Angeles to cover the trial. These included the famous writer Edgar Rice Burroughs. The trial was headline news every day, as people were both fascinated and horrified to read all the details of the most tragic death of the 12-year-old girl, Marion Parker. William Hickman was represented by attorney Jerome K. Walsh, who had advised him to plead insanity. During the trial, he introduced testimony from mental health professionals, as well as friends and family of the defendant, to support the claim that William Hickman was indeed insane. However, District Attorney Aza Keys was not willing to let the insanity defence sway the jury. He hired a team of psychiatrists to argue that William Hickman was in full control of his faculties when he committed the murder, that despite the defendant's erratic behaviour and his claim that a supernatural force called Providence urged him to kill, the district attorney maintained that William Hickman was perfectly sane at the time of the murder. In fact, he produced evidence that William Hickman had asked another prison inmate for advice on how to act insane in court and had expressed his intention to put on a dramatic display of laughter and screams in front of Marion's father during the trial. The prosecution believed that the defendant had committed this terrible crime in order to get revenge on Mr. Perry Parker, as Mr. Parker had testified against him during his previous trial for theft and forgery. The prosecution also thought that William Hickman had committed the murder, in part for the attention it would bring him, as he had admitted to a reporter that he desired the same level of media attention as the notorious murderers Leopold and Loeb. The trial ended on the 9th of February 1928, and after deliberating for only 36 minutes, the jury returned to announce that they found the defendant, William Hickman, guilty of murder in the first degree. Speaking to the press after the verdict, he acknowledged his guilt, saying, "The die is cast, and the state wins by a neck. I don't think I have much to live for, and I don't know yet why I killed the Parker girl, but I did, and I'll take my punishment." On Valentine's Day 1928, the judge sentenced William Hickman to death. He reacted to this with laughter. As he waited in prison for his execution, he requested to speak with a guard to make his final confession. In this, he provided further details about Marion's final days. He revealed that after being held captive for 3 days, Marion grew restless and demanded to be released. Fearing that she would attract attention, he tied her to a chair in his apartment and left to mail a ransom letter. Upon his return, Marion continued to insist on her release and was making a concerning amount of noise. This prompted him to strangle her with a towel. He described how she squirmed and struggled for 2 minutes before becoming still. He said that he then placed Marion's body in the bathtub. He then dismembered her limbs with a butcher's knife, and he acknowledged that she may have been alive when he started to carve up the body. On the 19th of October 1928, William Edward Hickman was executed at St. Quentin Prison. Welby Hunt, who William Hickman had said was with him on Christmas Eve 1926, when together they killed the pharmacist, was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. He was 16 years old when he committed the crime. Marion's family continued to live in Los Angeles, but the events that happened in December 1927 continued to haunt them. Marion's father, Mr. Perry Parker, died in 1944, aged 65. Her mother died 19 years later, in 1963, at the age of 75. Marion's brother was also 75 when he died in 1983, and her beloved twin sister Marjorie was 71 when she died in 1987. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for listening. As usual, please leave any comments or feedback you may have, and I hope to see you all again in the next Brief Case